Good morning. My name is Richard Hawley, and I am one of the founders of Greenspace, the Cambria Land Trust. Today we're going to be talking about three important things in the Cambria Monterey Pine Forest, and we're located in one of the properties that Greenspace owns called Strawberry Canyon. We're going to be talking about some tree diseases, we're going to be talking about some insects, and we're going to be talking about what supports the wildlife, and fourthly, we're going to be talking about the understory plants. So let's go over here and look at this Monterey pine tree. But first, Bob, maybe you could pan down here and we can see that the squirrels have been very active eating Monterey pine cones. That's what they do. So when you're walking in the forest and you see this detritus on the forest floor, this is usually called by gray squirrels, which are a native in our forest. Moving over here, I flagged these trees with this yellow tape so I could be reminded of what exactly we're talking about. And this tree has two different types of fungal diseases. The first one we see on the stem of the tree, or the bole, or the trunk. All three of those names describe the main structure of the tree. And you can see in 4 places where you have streaming sap, and we call that resinosis, and that is the tree is exhibiting a function that they're trying to flush out a fungal disease that's underneath the bark. And the way that fungal disease got underneath the bark is transmitted by bark boring insects, and this particular one is called Ips mexicanus, a bark beetle. And it bores into the tree, and unknowing to the beetle, it has a spore attached to its body of pitch canker, and it gets infected in the spot that the beetle goes. It doesn't flow in the vascular system of the tree at all. It's just a location. So this tree is definitely infected, and I would not want to collect pine cones from this tree. And another disease we have here is right at that node of that branch, that gall. You could pan in on that, Bob. And that's called western gall rust. And you might remember in the slideshow we had a few weeks ago that particular gall in the springtime was bright orange, and those were spores that cast off in the springtime, and that's how it reproduces itself, by casting spores off, and those spores would potentially land in other trees and infect them. So this is a tree we don't want to collect pine cone from. It's definitely symptomatic of 2 different diseases, as opposed to a tree that expresses no symptoms of any disease, and that's what we call asymptomatic. And you might be familiar with that word now that we have coronavirus, because there are people that are asymptomatic and people that are symptomatic. But that's a whole nother discussion. Let's move over here to a beautiful understory plant we have, and this is called coffeeberry. And Bob, you can pan in on these beautiful little berries, and these provide great habitat for birds to hide in from predators, and it also provides food. And this is a common plant we see in the understory of the Monterey pine forest. There's an overstory, which is the canopy, and then the understory are the plants that grow underneath the trees. And Native Americans used to use this berry. They peel off the skin, and the seed looks sort of like a coffee bean, hence coffee berry. And it was used as a diuretic. We're going to go to station 2 now. Hey, hello again. This is our second station in Strawberry Canyon that I'd like to talk a little bit about. And these are baby pine cones, and these were fertilized last year, and they're going to be growing into full-size cones. And you can see how they radiate around a branch, and very important food source, the seeds that come out of the cone for animals and birds. Plus it helps regenerate our forest. And we have pine cones growing here, and over to my right you can see them on the branch that Bob's panning in on now. Okay, we're going to move to another tree, a large mature tree that's currently being massively attacked by bark beetles, and I'm going to show you what the symptoms are and what to look for if you're ever interested in analyzing trees in the future. This tree is, I would say it's probably 60 years old, maybe 70 years old. It's about, the diameter is almost 20 inches. And I was walking in the forest on this trail a couple of days ago, and I noticed this fresh resin leaking out of the tree. It's all the way up. And I came over and looked at the base, and I saw, which Bob is going to pan in on right now, all this grass. And I don't know if you remember in the slideshow that when beetles bore into a tree, they leave this dust, boring dust, and we call it frass. And it's all over. And the tree is starting to suffer from this attack. And there's also this little pile here, that's for the red turpentine beetle. And I see a whole bunch of wings here from termites also. So this tree, here's a bunch of termite wings. What? So this tree is currently being attacked by the Ips mexicanus, the bark beetle. And what we hope that it doesn't have any spores of pitch canker on it. Now we're going to go to station 3. Okay, we're now at station 3 in Strawberry Canyon, and I'm going to point out one of my favorite understory plants, and this is called the Toyon. And sometimes people confuse this with the coffee berry, but they're very distinctly different. And one of the things is the leaves. On the Toyon, the leaf has a serrated edge, so it's sharp, little barbs on it. And it also has a cluster of berries. And these berries turn red, especially close to our holiday of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And one of the nicknames for this is Christmas berry. And that berry also provides food for birds and other animals. And it's a common understory plant, provides shade and hiding for animals, and it's a great food source too. Plus it's really beautiful tree, especially when it's all red. Now we're going to move on to Station 4. Okay, we're at Station 4 now in Strawberry Canyon, and I want to point out a really unique little animal that lives in our Monterey pine forest, and it also lives in the oak woodlands too. You can see that mound of sticks and straw. That is a big-eared wood rat, and it makes its home there. It keeps building it. As the sticks and stones start to deteriorate, it just moves up another level, and they can get up to 10 feet tall in some instances. The animal is monogamous, means it usually mates for life, and it's a really nice creature. Some people confuse it with the Norwegian rat, which is definitely a pest. This is a native rat in our forest. It's almost it collects things and builds these structures. So when you see these, you know what they are now. Okay, we're at Station 5 now, and I want to point out a few plants that grow very low in our forest. And one of them is a native strawberry, and it's right here. It's got leaves of 3. There's some. And as opposed to other plants that have leaves of 3, like this is the Pacific blackberry, and it provides food. This is the strawberry, and this is poison oak, right here. So they have clusters of 3 also, and you want to stay away from that one. But this one in the springtime has a little tiny red strawberry on it that's incredibly pungent and sweet to bitter. But all the strawberries that you see in the supermarkets and so forth are cultivars of this native plant, and they produce now these beautiful strawberries for us to eat. It would take a long time to collect a lot of strawberries to make a jam or something for a fruit salad in this forest, but that's where those large strawberries come from is our native strawberry in California. Okay, we're at our next station in Strawberry Canyon and our walk in the woods. And I'm going to point out this really interesting plant that makes its entire living in off the tree. It gets all of its water and nutrients and everything it needs from the tree. It does not photosynthesize at all. And this is called dwarf mistletoe. This is the female plant. It's got these little berries on it. And right above that, Bob, we have male plant. No berries on it. So when this plant is ready to reproduce, these berries shoot off. They like explode. They're under a lot of hydrostatic pressure, and they can go, especially on a downhill trajectory, they could go 50, 60, 70 feet. But in a close environment like this, it may only go a few inches before it hits something, or 2 or 3 yards. You just don't know. But when these shoot off, they're very sticky, and they land on something. And it makes its living off of pine trees. So if it landed on another tree, it wouldn't hurt it. But a pine tree, say it landed on a needle, and it's stuck there. And then when it's foggy or rainy, what is stuck becomes viscous, and it slides down, and it'll land on a twig, and it'll send in a root and colonize the tree, and it takes a couple of years for it to exhibit either a female or a male plant. And the tree gets swollen like that, like this. And this is kind of forming what we call the witch's broom again. You get all these deformities and these branches going in all different directions. So this is dwarf mistletoe. Okay, this is another curious insect that lives in our forest, and it's called the Sequoia pitch moth. Sequoia, like the big giant redwood tree, but it likes minor pines, and I'm not sure why they called it Sequoia pitch moth, but it's a clear-winged moth. It looks more like a wasp than a moth, and it is that glob of pitch right below that Western gall rust infection, right there. And the adult female moth lays an egg in the bark, and it gets underneath the bark and it irritates the tree, and the tree starts trying to pitch that irritant out, and it forms a glob of pitch around the egg, and the egg will mature, and that moth will live underneath that glob for 2 years before it emerges, and then it'll fly away and try to mate in 6 weeks, and that's its life cycle. So it lives predominantly in that pitch for most of its life. It doesn't do much damage to a tree unless it's just, well, I've seen trees that have had like 30 or 40 of these things on it, and why that moth is attracted to the tree is it produces some type of pheromone that attracts it, and I'm not sure what that pheromone is. Let's go to the next station. One of the things that I've learned over the years is trying to guesstimate the age of a tree, and this trick works really well with smaller trees, but not mature trees. So mature trees, you either have to drill in and core it and count the rings, but on a tree like this, what we do is count the branch whorls. So between each branch whorl is a year of growth. So I've been told. So we had kind of a normal rainfall here and here. Here we didn't get much rain at all. It was during the drought. The next year we had a fantastic rainfall. So we have all that growth. So you count the rings, or not the rings, but you count the branch whorls as a year of growth. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this tree is maybe 8 years old. Another very important feature of a forest, and that's a dead tree. And the one we have in the background here is a pine that died a number of years ago. But it's providing, now that it's dead, another entire important service for wildlife and the forest and our community, actually. So it's been drilled out at the top, and there's a hole up there that birds have made a cavity, and nesting mammals and birds will use that in numerous different years to nest and rear their young. Woodpeckers will also drill into these snags and store acorns, and especially the acorn woodpecker, the one with the little red cap on its head. And it doesn't necessarily eat the acorn. It's after the insects that colonize the acorn. And you can see some trees that are just riddled and stuffed full of acorns, and that's called a acorn silage. And birds use it for all sorts of reasons. But bats also use this they get underneath the loose bark and roost in the day and come out at night. So that's a very important function. As birds eat insects, like some of the ones we were looking at underneath the bark, keep the insect population down. And the number of snags per acre is directly correlated with how many woodpeckers there are in the forest. So if the snags disappear, then woodpecker population starts to decline too. Okay, we're going to be talking about a couple of things with this tree. First is the smallest of the bark beetles. And you may remember in the slideshow that you saw a week or more ago, where we looked at the red turpentine beetle, and we looked at the Ips mexicanus, the middle range beetle, and then the very small twig beetle. Well, this is more than likely a infestation of a twig beetle, and it has killed the end of this twig on this minor branch that's coming out of this tree. And it will drill into this, underneath the bark, and the tree will try to flush it out, and when it does that, it plugs up all the vascular system, and the tree dies from that point out, just like it might with pitch canker. And this probably has pitch canker too, because we see some resin drops, and they all happened at this branch whorl. Is where these little tiny branches come out. So this has a twig beetle. This looks like it might be a twig beetle also. And this tree definitely has pitch canker. And I'm going to bring this branch down just to show. You can see that drop of resin. That is an infestation of a twig beetle, and the tree is trying to pitch it out, and it's died from that point out. And these dead branches that bend over and look like little shepherd's crooks, that's a real good indication that it could be pitch canker. But my guess, it is pitch canker, and there is Ips, a small twig beetle that are coming here, not Ips, but a twig beetle called Pediatrus. Okay, let's go to the next station. So we had talked quite a bit about fork mistletoe, but what I didn't show you was what we call a witch's broom. And this is a classic witch's broom. So this has been infected with the plant dwarf mistletoe, and it has caused these branches to go crazy. And they're growing in all different directions. They're not growing perpendicular to the trunk, and it takes on the look of a broom, and foresters have called it a witch's broom. So when you're walking in the forest and you can point out, oh, there's a witch's broom, and you can tell them why it formed. We're going to go to the next station. Okay, we're at another station here in Strawberry Canyon, and this is a tree that's probably 30 years old and 20 years old, and it could be a little older, but it has died a few years ago. And I'm going to try to take some bark off this tree and see if we can find some bark beetles. The Ips mexicanus, or the engraver beetle. I brought my flat bar with me and take a little bit off. Oh look, we've got some termites. So the termites have come in. That's usually the second wave of insects after the bark beetles get through with it. Let's see if we can find some bark beetles in here. Well, that looks like one right there. It is. That is Ips mexicanus, that little brown guy right there. And these little holes you see like this in this bark, that is where they have drilled out and flown to another tree perhaps, or maybe a bird got it, we hope. So they make all these little tunnels, and the tunnels aren't very, here's another one. These are young adults, and they're ready to fly off. And you can see all this loose brass in here. And there's one of the galleries. You can see right through here. I'll kind of clean it out. And they've tunneled through here and laid eggs. And this is the progeny of the beetles that laid the eggs. This is a little nest of something, and I don't know what that is, but it's kind of curious. So you can see right here in this little piece of bark, we saw at least 5. They lay eggs maybe 5 times a year, 20 eggs each. And there's millions of these insects. But they also provide, these insects are a food source for woodpeckers and bats.